Hello and welcome back to Excel. Today's lecture is on formulas. If you remember last time we talked about formatting and just getting kind of used to how Excel is set up, but today we are going to work with formulas. And you should all be familiar with formulas, having used math books before. Math books have lots of formulas, and typically math books are very sad. Right? And why are math books sad? It's because they have many problems. And that's where the beauty of Excel comes in. Excel can solve many problems easily and multiple times for you. So that's really the nice part of Excel as far as a tool. Formulas allow us to perform arithmetic operations on numerical values and combine strings. It's something else it can do. Oops, excuse me there. Combine strings. Let's go back. Combine strings. Let me get my pen up here. Sorry about that. It can combine strings and compare contents from one cell to another. Strings, just so you know, that is text. Anything that you would type. So make sure you know that. A lot of times that comes up on an exam. Formulas also may contain functions, and we'll talk about functions next time. So here's a typical example of some formula. If you were given this for a math problem and the teacher said, let x equal 1, what is the value of this, right? Or x equals, and so after that, maybe you have x equals 500. What is the value? Or x equals 200. And if you have to do a bunch of these, this gets to be a real pain, right? Excel makes it so much easier for us to do if we set it up properly. So here is the same formula that we just looked at. And if we set this up, we can just say, let's just say x is equal to whatever value is in cell A3, right? If we look at that, how does that look? This formula starts out with our equal sign. It starts out with a 2 times A3. That's our value of x, right? Whatever x is. It is cubed minus 5 divided by A3, or x squared minus 3. Now we can change this cell A3 in here to any value we want, and it will calculate it for us. It's very nice and handy that way. One thing you should know about formulas, and it's very important, is that all formulas start out with an equal sign, and they are then followed by values or cell locations and have some operators or operations to it. So let's take a look down here at some examples. We have equals, so they always start out with equals. Here's a value 3 plus, that's our operator, an addition, right, plus 4. If I hit enter on this, obviously it would equal 7. The next one has equals, and it has some cell location, A2. So it's going to go into the cell location A2 and find out what the value is there and add to it the value of 6. So whatever cell A2 has a value of 1, it will be 7. Or if it's 2, it will be 8, and so on and so forth. Same thing as another one here is you can use a multiplication. So it has all these arithmetic operators. This last one's a little odd. It has an I and an F. Those are text, or what we would also call strings, right? And it has this ampersand sign in here, which is a concatenation operation, which we will talk about more in a minute. Here's our basic arithmetic operations. We have the plus for addition, the minus for subtraction, the multiply is our asterisk, we have our division sign, we have our caret sign for our exponent, raising it to some power like cubed or squared, or here it can even be some variable, right? It could be any variable we want. And then last we have our percentage, which is just to divide by 100. Note that this percentage operator requires only one operand, a cell reference, or a constant. So here's just referencing that, and it's going to divide it. This A1, it's going to divide it by 100. All right, let's take a look at some examples. Okay, here we are in Excel, and we're going to write up some examples for us. So what I have here is I have a value of 6 and 2, and I'm going to run through different examples using 6 and 2. We could think of this, in our algebra book as x and y, right? Those could be our values, x and y. I'm going to center those. Oops, it didn't center it for me. Here we go. I'll bold it too, right? So those are our values, 6 and 2, right, for x and y. So I'm going to write my formula where I'm adding these two values together. So I will have my equal sign, and I'm just going to click on cell A2, use my plus symbol, and then click on B2 and hit enter. That's all there's to it for writing a formula. So here I'm adding those two values. I could also, let's do a subtraction, I'll do equals. I could type, if I want, I could type the value A2, right, minus B2 and hit enter. That's a little more cumbersome. I like to select them. It goes a lot faster. So again, using multiplication, I'm going to select that cell, multiply with the asterisk times cell B2. You see it easily does this for me. We can do this for division. Equals 6 divided by 2. And then we have our exponent again. Equals 6. And then above the number 6 on your keyboard with the shift key is our caret and then our 2. And the last one is to create a percentage. I'm just going to pick that one. So there's our, oops, I didn't finish it, 2%. So you see I didn't add anything in there. I really wanted to do a percent, which is the shift 5, right? There it's 0.02. So put it in decimal format for me. So again, the beauty of this is now that I've set it up this way is that I can change these, right? Look, I can change that to 10 and it redoes it. I can do 12, it redoes it. Because the other way it could have been, I could have written this as equals, 6 plus 2, right? And equals 6 minus 2, and so on and so forth, what I had before. But if I wanted to try different ones, these are kind of like hard in there, right? But it's nice to set it up with a variable, because now I can change it, and it recalculates everything real nice and easily for me, right? So that's kind of nice. Look at what happens when I put in 0. Oh, we got a division by 0 error, right? Because we're dividing. If I double click on this, it goes back and shows me where that formula is. So that's really handy. We see, oh, I'm dividing by 0. Not good, right? But any of these you can double click on and it shows the reference. The color A2 is in blue and the square is in blue. Same with B2 is in red and everything. That's really nice and handy for us. Okay. The other operation that we have that I just kind of mentioned before when I had that equals I ampersand F is this string operator, which is a catenation. It catenates two strings together. It puts them together, right? So an individual operand can be strings or numbers, and the results will always be a catenation, will always be a string. So if this is a value of 1 and 3 and I catenate it, it will be a string. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so here we are. Notice on here I've color-coded my tabs. This sheet is also on the system, the class site, so you can find it real easily. So let's take a look. Let's catenate these two. It's equals this cell, ampersand, which is above the 7, so shift 7, and then B1. Hit enter, and it puts it together. All right, it's all one thing. And you may want to use that sometimes. It's not used very often, but it can be used. As I mentioned earlier, we can also compare cells, right? So we can do a comparison of two different cells. We can do that with our typical comparison type operators, such as the greater than or equal, less than or equal, or you'll see these two in the bottom, which are showing the, something happened to us here. Hold on. Sorry about that. So you can see here, this bottom has this symbol here, which is not equal to, right? So let's take a look at using Excel to solve problems with this also. Okay, so we have a similar situation here. I've got two variables, an x and y. Again, I'm going to insert a line right up above, and I'm going to put in my x, and I'm going to put in a y, right? So I can always insert if I didn't like what I had. I'm going to center this, and I'm going to bold it too real quickly. All right, so let's compare these two values. Again, I start out with an equals, always an equals for a formula. I'll select my A2, and I'm going to compare it with a greater than sign with the y. Okay, if I hit enter, it tells me true. All this does, all these comparisons just give me a true or false reading, right? So if I do this one equals, and this one is this cell equals greater than or equal, that is also true. I can do it again, and we'll do the less than, right, just to show you how that works. Less than, false, and we can do that also again. False. And the last one, let's just see if they are equal to each other. Oops. And false. And the last one is if they are not equal to each other. And we see that's true because they aren't equal. So what happens if they are, right? So now it changes everything there. Let's see, this is false. Are they equal to each other? Yes, so that's true, 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 right? But they're not greater than or less than each other, right? Let's make this one -2, right? So it's less. So this one is not greater, it's not equal, but it is less. It's less than or equal to it, and they are not equal. So you can always change these around again, and again, that's the beauty of Excel. Okay, so this is all comparison operation. And we're going to talk more about this next time. We will use a lot of this comparison operation in our if formulas and everything. Okay? Okay, now let's take a look at an example writing an actual formula. Here in this case we have z, some variable z that we want to, oops, sorry about that, find the answer for. Let's go forward here. That we're looking the answer for, and then we've got our variable x and y. And what we're going to use in the Excel formula is to let z equal the cell with the formula in it, and then we will have cells x be b2 and cell c2 be equal to y. And then we could write this whole formula out. And you could write this by hand if you want. We say equals, and we use a parentheses to make sure we're doing everything for the numerator. So we have 5 times our x, which is b2 squared, right, the caret, the ampersand sign, plus, the caret sign, plus 3 times c2, which c2 is y, minus 7, right, and so on. Let's take a look at doing this in Excel real quickly. Okay, here's our blank worksheet. I've got that formula set up here for us. We want cell z to be some cell in our equation. X is, let's see, b2 is x and c2 is y. So right here I'm going to put this as x and this as y. I'm going to center them, and I'll even bold them. And so b2 down below is the value, and here I'm going to set this as z equals, right? I'm going to bold it, and I'm going to left justify it. So here's where I'm going to have my equation. I'm going to put it in B4. is where my equation will be. I start out again with equals, and I would need my numerator, which is 5, right? Is 5 times b2, right? Squared plus 3 times ry minus 7. And you'll see there's no values in there, and it doesn't matter. They can be. There can be no values at this time, right? Divided by our new denominator, which is 2 times our x, which is this cell here. It can be the same cell again, plus 1, close parentheses, minus 7. If we look at this, it makes sense, right? This is 0, this is 0. So on the numerator, we have a negative 7. And the denominator, we have 2 times 0 plus 1. So we end up with negative 7. So it actually works. And if I put in values of 0, it's a good way to test everything to see if it works. You know, now I can change this to 1 and this one to 1 or whatever and change this around. So that is a way of writing the formula. I'm going to show you a better way to write this formula, because sometimes these formulas get very complicated and you'll want to do this for your homework. So let's just call this z numerator and say that equals something, and z denominator equals something, and then we can say z equals, right? Let's just do this, make it look a little nicer. We're going to rewrite this formula one more time. We'll add, again, we're doing the numerator. So this time, because I'm just doing only the numerator, I don't have to actually use a parentheses at this point. So here's our squared term plus 3 times y minus 7. That's nice. What if I put in 0? Right? Yeah, it should be 0. Let's do the denominator. Equals 2 times x plus 1. What's nice about doing this way is it makes it smaller. You can easily check your work, right? Now I can take these two and I can take my z value and I can take my numerator divided by my denominator. And I get my actual answer. I can highlight this if I want as my answer. Either way is correct. This second method that I just did, though, that is a lot easier to do. It may look like it takes more time and it's so hard and everything, but it's actually a better way of working out the problems, to split it out into smaller sections. So I highly encourage you to do it in that method. It will make life a lot easier for you, especially in some of the homework problems where there are lots of complicated equations and you have to try and figure out each part. So I would highly recommend doing that. Okay, in Excel we also have our same order of operation that we do in mathematics. Right? Our typical order of operation, always do the parentheses first. Our percentages, exponent, multiplication, and division are done at the same time in order from left to right. Same with addition and subtraction, from left to right is priority. Concatenation is 6, and then comparisons are 7. So in the event of a tie, again, we always proceed from left to right. So like addition and subtraction, multiplication and division. Okay. One thing that's very important and to learn about is relative versus absolute copying and moving, right? What's nice, like I said before, is you can make these formulas and we could use our copy command and move them all around, and it makes life easy for solving many of the problems with just changing the variables one way, right? So one thing we want to look at is, what does it mean to do a normal copying and move, right? And this is always relative. This is our relative copy and move, okay? And then we'll look at absolute. So let's just take a quick look at relative move. Okay, here we are again with this formula. I'm going to make I'm going to put in some values here, like 3 or something, and 2, right? And I'm going to make a copy. I'm going to copy this, Control C. and I'm just going to place it down here. Well, that's strange, right? That's not the same value. Why is that? And it's because we used a relative copy. If I double click on it, you'll see that it's showing me the cells it's getting the values from. Well, it's really a location of 2 up and then the 2 over. Well, that's the same relative location in here, right? So no matter where I copy this thing, it's always that same way. Just like if I would copy this formula here, it's just going to divide the 2 up above. Well, there's nothing there. That's not good, right? But what happens if I took it here, right? If I copied it here? Oh, it gives me a value because it's taking the 1 above and that 1. I'm just undoing all that. So that is your relative copy. It always, and just you can play around with that, and it always keeps the same orientation of the cells and the way the formulas work. So that is a relative move. Now let's look at the absolute move in a minute here. Okay, an absolute move or copy, we add a $ in front of both the column letter and the row number. Will make what we call an absolute move. Total absolute move means that wherever you copy that cell, it always keeps reference to those original cells that we made as with a $. So I'll show you this in a minute. So a $ in front of the column letter only keeps the same column reference. A $, and only the number keeps a row reference. I typically don't do that. I use both $ almost all the time. One way you can do this instead of typing the $ is you can do an F4, which will toggle between relative and absolutes. All right, so let's take a look at this as a last example, and then we're done for today. Okay, so we're back here. Again, now I'm going to make this cell an absolute cell formula. So I'm going to go into this formula. I double clicked on it, and now I moved my cursor. You see it moving around in there. And I'm going to press F4, function 4, and it will toggle through, put those $ in right away. If I hit it again, it does it in front of the number, then the column, and back to nothing, which is relative. Right, so there it is, absolute. I'm going to make this one absolute, and I'm going to make this one absolute. Right. Now when I copy this, look, it gives me the same value. It's because it's going back over there. So if I copy it way down here even, right, it's giving me that same value. If I took this off of here, right, I'm going to toggle through. Now if I copy this one and put it over somewhere here, it's going there. So that's the difference between relative and absolute. Right? This is very powerful when wanting to do something. So let's use this same formula again, but let's change our values of x and y. I'm going to redo this real quickly as an example. I'm going to copy this, copy, paste it here, and I'm going to show you a way of doing a relative and absolute way of doing this. All right, so here's our z. Okay, and I'm just going to type in that formula again, which was 5. I'm going to use the whole formula, not the better way, but this is the way I'm going to do it real quickly just for time reasons. I do not, again, recommend this. 5x squared plus 3 times y and minus 7 and divided by our 2 times x plus 1. And you see we're getting the same value. That's nice. What's nice is I can change this, right? Like I said before, I could try this as, let's just try this as 1 and 1, right? Then I could change each of these. But what if I say I want this one to be 1 and increase to 2 and 3, right? And kind of go on, right? And I could go, I want to do this up to 10, right? So I can do that autofill. And this time I'm going to do 1.5, and I want to go up by a half. I think I can do autofill with this. Let's give it a try. Sure enough, it works, right? Well, I can take this and use this relative copy, and I can just go do Control C and Control V, and you'll see it'll give me the values of each of these. Another way of doing this, I'm going to show you a real quick way to copy, is when you do tables like this. If I can take this handle in the bottom right where that square is, and move my cursor over it and just drag it down. That will copy it in also. We can check to make sure, right? I can double click and see. The other way is I can just double click on that handle and it will fill in that formula, or those formulas all the way down. That's a good way of using a relative value. Now, let's do this same thing again. I'm going to copy this because it's relative, right? And do one more and show you a way of, oops, why did it do it for me? Sorry about that. And here, I'm going to just have x, and here I'm going to have all these values. So there I have my x and y, but this time, so if I copy this down, oh, it's not doing it right, because I want to keep x always as 1 or whatever value. I can change this by making my x, or my a, 26 in this case, absolute, right? If I do that, right, I can copy this down, and now look, it always takes that same value, which is really handy. So play around with the absolute and relative copies. They're very powerful, makes life a lot easier for you. So I highly recommend doing that. Okay, so that ends today's lecture. Please take time in class, ask me questions about any of this. We'll go run through some examples in class, some extra problems, and then the homework will be handed out. So thanks for watching this, and we will see you soon.